Hey everyone, as you'll probably know if you've been checking out the Censorship Gaming Twitter account recently, there has been a big case of controversy with localization company Xseed and their upcoming game Akiba's Beat. Akiba's Beat is the action RPG sequel to Akiba's Trip, and its release is now only a couple of weeks away. However, jumping straight into the news here, one of the game's localizers, Tom Schultz, a name that many of you are probably already familiar with, posted an in-depth post over on the game's official forum. The post details a few localization changes that were made to the game, and is something that you should definitely check out for yourself. As for this video, we'll be just focusing on one of these changes, as this is a change that's much more relevant to censorship and has seen a lot of discussion recently. Now, the change is revolving around one of the in-game signs for the various businesses located within the game's location of Akiba. One of these was supposed to be a parody of NKK Switches, a Japanese light switch manufacturer based out of Akihabara. How did the developers parody this? By changing the name to KKK Witches. So already you can probably see where this whole thing is heading, considering what the term KKK can mean. This sign is extremely out of the way and is something that most players will never see. Tom spotted the sign whilst working on the title though and mentioned it to his colleagues, finding the sign a little humorous and quite the accurate representation of what real life Akihabara is like, as messages with offensive English are actually quite prevalent throughout Japan. Their colleagues didn't see the humorous side in it though and wanted it removed. Xseed then sent an email to the devs explaining how this sign is offensive in English, and the response was that they didn't mean for it to be offensive, and the devs then changed the sign to ACQ Witches for the English release. So basically this is a pretty open and shut case of lost in translation and general localization work, right? Well, not quite. Whilst it's true there are some very valid localization points for the sign being changed, it turns out that Xseed were going to ask to have the sign changed no matter what, even if the developers wanted to reference the KKK. Even if the developers didn't want to change it, Xseed wanted the sign changed. Tom speaks about this in their very first post even, stating that calling it an act of censorship isn't unwarranted considering 1, we would have asked them to change it if they hadn't done so voluntarily, 2, our email did not directly ask them to change it, but I mean how else were they supposed to interpret us asking about it at all, and 3, the Japanese version still retains the KKK Witches moniker, with the change only being made to all English versions. Censorship Gaming questioned Tom further on this, wanting to be sure what we're saying is true, and Tom again reiterates the censorship nature of this whole ordeal. To quote, "The biggest reason I have for fighting this though is, as noted in my response to Cecilia's question on the previous page, the reason why it's being changed. There are those who have very valid localization reasons why it should be changed, and you guys have brought some of them up, but the official reason we chose not to keep it is because it's potentially offensive to a segment of the fanbase, and the higher ups were afraid it might impact sale forecast if retailers got wind of it being in the game, which they wouldn't have since the sign in question is actually pretty hard to find and unlikely to be seen at all by 99% of players. So yes, there were localization reasons for this change, but this change wasn't made for those reasons. The word KKK was removed from Akiba's Beat because it's offensive and for business reasons. Even if the developers didn't want to change it, even if they actually intended on referencing the KKK, Xseed wanted it removed. That was the issue here. It's correct that in this specific case you can justify the removal as an act of localization, but that doesn't change the fact it would have been removed even if there wasn't those reasons. For example, imagine the hypothetical scenario where the devs perhaps wanted to make a joke. The Simpsons did this in episode 166 even, a show that is on daytime TV, but if that was the case with Akiba's Beat, Xseed would have still wanted it removed. That was the issue here, and it was so much of an issue that Tom has been asked to be removed from the game's credits, a game he was heavily involved in. It goes further than that though. Xseed company policy dictates that if a team member doesn't want to be credited for one game, then they must be removed from all future games too. To quote from Tom's post again, "Since the whole Xseed team is credited on each project by our official company title rather than anybody's specific role on an individual game, we cannot be selective about which games people are credited in. If someone is ashamed to be associated with one of our games, then they are ashamed to be associated with the company as a whole, and won't be credited in future games either." Tom has always been a very strong opponent against censorship. He explains, "It's a bit of a shame, but I feel it's a good symbolic gesture on my part showing my commitment to my principles on this matter. And honestly, I'm perfectly fine with being the ninja localizer of Xseed fighting the good old anti-censorship fight from the shadows." He also later jokes that if you asked them even 4 or 5 years ago how they saw their job at Xseed ending, he would have probably told you getting fired for something involving video game censorship. With somebody like Tom at Exceed though, you can rest assured that if any changes are made to your games, you're going to hear about it. Tom is committed to holding down the fort and providing full transparency about these things, and there isn't another localizer quite like them in this entire industry. They also watch Censor Gaming's videos, so make sure to say hi in the comments below, and until next time, thank you for watching.